Hillary Clinton has tried desperately to make Benghazi go away, but unlike her emails, this report can't be deleted.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are under attack. Our very way of life, our very existence is threatened. They have already taken over Washington. They continue to destroy our Constitution. It is time to take back our country now.
The Wise Conservative Show, bringing wisdom back to politics.
We'd like to start by formally welcoming you to the greatest podcast you will ever listen to. This could only be the Wise Conservative Show. My name is Dakota Wise. With me, my co-host, Connor Wise. This week we've got a riveting episode where we go over the recent release of the Benghazi Report and what was in it, what it means, what happened, and how will we prevent such a tragedy from occurring again. We'll finish up the back half of the show with more John Kerry-isms. It seems every time he opens his mouth, something stupid is coming out of it. And then we'll wrap things up with the Democratic platform proposal that wants to limit your freedom of speech. But
before we get ahead of ourselves, let's bring it on back to that Benghazi report.
Now, of course, this report is making huge headlines all over the place. And it really depends on what news source you're looking at. Some of the liberal media was portraying this as not a big deal, as nothing new coming out. But what we have in front of us with this report is 800 pages of definitive proof that many, many, many things went wrong in the government. And 4 Americans paid the price because no one was on their way to help. And no one in the Obama administration actually sought to keep these people alive. Now, this report was broken up into 5 sections. Each of these sections detailed a different time period for the event. Some covered, say, before the event and what led up to such a dangerous situation, even being able to occur. Say part 2 covers the response during, etc., etc.
But let's look at the details first from part 1. So it actually came out that despite Obama and the Secretary of Defense, they actually put orders out to send military assets into Benghazi to protect our personnel there. But those personnel actually never left, and they never actually went to Benghazi.
8 hours after the attack had begun was when the final 2 Americans were killed under mortar fire. 8 hours this attack had lasted, and nobody in the military had tried to respond. No one had even moved towards Benghazi, and there's absolutely no excuse. There were units who could have been there in 3-4 hours, and nobody responded for some unknown reason, whether it was a failure of communication, whether it was, under bad orders, who knows what. No one in the military was actually moving, except one unit, and this was a unit in Tripoli, who took it upon themselves to deploy themselves, and they actually got there into Benghazi, and they actually helped fight, and is probably the reason that more Americans were not dead that night. But we'll go into that a little bit later as we move through the different parts.
Around 7:30 that night, the White House had a 2-hour meeting which really didn't focus on Benghazi too much. It focused on a YouTube video instead.
Now, what's important here, what needs to be kept in mind when looking at this report, when considering anything about Benghazi, is that this event occurred just 56 days before the 2012 election. So when we're looking at the responses, when we're looking at why people said what they said, why they didn't do what they did, everything needs to be kept in the frame of mind that this was seen as a very important event in the general election. How Barack Obama handled it very well could have changed the course of the election. So keep that in mind.
And within that meeting, not only did they talk about a YouTube video, I believe it was for half of the meeting, the talking points was about the YouTube video. For the other half, they did actually consider deployment, but they had to make sure that the Libyan government agreed before any deployment was made.
They wanted to make sure the Libyan government approved all plans. All of them. We had Americans fighting for their lives, under attack. And we wanted to check with the government of Libya whether it was okay to go protect these Americans.
And let's also keep in mind that the Libyan government basically didn't even exist at this point.
This is like saying there's a government in Somalia or there's a government in Syria. Sure, I guess technically there might be, but the government doesn't even have control of their own people. Otherwise, why would it be okay? Why would any government that had control of their country allow a United States embassy to be under siege for 8 hours plus? It was a non-point, but Barack Obama was trying to, I don't know. I don't understand where it comes in, where we needed permission to save American lives.
It was once again connecting to that election. He wanted to make sure that he was doing everything by the book, so that when people did, because he knew people would end up seeing this in the future, he wanted to make sure when they saw it that he was doing it by the books.
Even at this time, Libya was a very shaky area. It was even one of the president's goals was to ensure that Libya did not become a safe haven for terrorism, such as groups like Al-Qaeda. Because, of course, at this point, ISIS really wasn't a real big player in the area. So it was the president's belief that if we were able to not piss off the Libyan government, perhaps the area might not delve into terrorism. There's no excuse, 100% no excuse, for us to try to seek permission from the Libyan government when American lives were at the line. I don't care what country you're in. If our embassy in Germany was under attack, I wouldn't be requiring us to seek actual permission from, Angela Merkel. You save the American lives, and then you worry about the diplomatic ramifications.
But even in this meeting, they didn't even have everyone there who should have been there. The vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, which normally would be in any White House meeting, he didn't attend because he was hosting a dinner party for foreign dignitaries. He wasn't there listening to all of these different details unfold, trying to suggest ways to go into the future to save these American lives. He was hosting a party at his house instead.
At this meeting, it's important to note that they spent over half of it talking about a YouTube video. Now, all evidence suggested that this had absolutely nothing to do with the protests over a YouTube video that the American people were later told was the cause of this terror attack. We knew very well that night that this had absolutely nothing to do with a quote-unquote peaceful protest over a video that turned violent. Now, there was a YouTube video that had caused some unrest in the Middle East. A week prior, there had been protests in Cairo over the YouTube video, yet none of these protests actually turned violent. And actually in Libya, almost a week before, there had been protests as well. Now, the CIA found that this was the only time that there had actually been protests in the area. Yet the Barack Obama administration tried to play it off as this was just a protest, that this stemmed from those protests. They knew very well that the protests had ended about a week ago, and this had absolutely nothing to do with it. So then why did they lie? Why did they try to lie to the American people and say this was peaceful protests over a video? Because the president knew that a terror attack 56 days before an election meant bad news for him, especially when his competitor, Mitt Romney, came off much, much stronger against terrorism. So it would have been bad news for him if this hadn't have been delayed and stalled as much as possible.
And as we talked about before, no forces really showed up except for that one team from Tripoli. And we actually found out through this report, though, that there were teams that were set up. They were ready to deploy to help our people in Benghazi, but they never received the actual order. A fleet anti-terrorism security team.
These are like the guys that go in. These are like the SWAT team of terrorism. They're the ones you want in, and they get things done.
They were on a plane in Rota, Spain, which on a commercial airline, that's only 3.5 hours out, which using military planes, you wouldn't have to take the same route. It would be a lot quicker. They sat on that plane for 3 hours, and they changed in and out of their uniforms 4 times within this event.
They sat there for 3 hours. That's the amount of time it would have taken to actually flown to Benghazi. So you keep hearing from the presidential administration that there was absolutely nothing that could have been done, that there were no forces available. This event lasted 8 hours or more. By the time the last 2 Americans died in mortar rounds, there had been more than enough time to get this terrorist response team, anti-terrorism response team, in the area and actually have helped evacuate Americans out of the embassy, out of the compound, and gotten them to safety. Yet because of orders, this team sat on the runway for 3 hours, changing in and out of their uniform 4 times. That means somebody somewhere was pretty indecisive, saying, oh, you're going to go. No, you're not. You're going to go. No, you're not. Who knows what they were waiting for? Perhaps the president just couldn't reach the Libyan government in order to receive permission to conduct this raid. Who knows? But what we do know is that the only units we had in the area were 2 unarmed drones that were able to watch the events unfold live, and we had the unit from Tripoli, which basically ignored orders and said, you know what, there's Americans who need us. There are Americans who have their lives in danger. They're under attack. We're going to do everything in our power to ensure that these people stay safe.
When our people were actually evacuated from this annex, it wasn't even by American forces. They were evacuated by Libyan forces that weren't even affiliated with any of the militias that we currently backed within Libya.
This was by militia forces that we had not had any sort of contact with whatsoever. It was more of a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I think, in this case.
These militias were comprised of former Gaddafi loyalists. And if you remember correctly, we are the ones that backed the rebels against Gaddafi.
So it was luck that we even had anyone there to help with the evacuation. Because by all accounts, these people should have hated the U.S. So we got extremely lucky that this militia was actually there and helped fight the terrorist attack as it was happening. They helped defend the embassy and actually helped with the evacuation. So moving on to part 2 of the report, and it too contains a lot of bombshell findings of just what went wrong during that night and the events preceding up to it.
Now, this is the part that we referenced earlier. 5 out of 10 of the items from that White House meeting were actually referencing the video. So 5 out of 10 of the things that they talked about were the YouTube video and what it exactly made these forces do within Libya, within Benghazi. And so they were still, of course, talking about the video more than anything else. It's astounding that they continued to just think that it was a video when we had Americans being killed.
Now, to further back up the fact that there was absolutely no evidence at the time that this video was what actually caused the unrest in Benghazi, was the fact that eyewitness accounts of people who lived in the area after the event took place said that in the weeks leading up to the terror attack, there had been virtually no discussion of the video whatsoever in the city. So this once again proves the president directly lied to the American people, the president's administration, that is. Everyone knew that it had nothing to do with the video, and that's where so many Americans are angry at Hillary Clinton because she went in front of American people, in front of Congress, on the news, all over the place, and said that it was directly tied to a YouTube video. And she she knew perfectly well. Actually, that very first night where it was happening, while the attack was happening, Hillary Clinton emailed Chelsea Clinton, her daughter, and sent an email saying that a Al-Qaeda-like attack was currently occurring in Benghazi. She knew that it was a terror attack from the start. So the fact that even for, the matter of weeks they tried to play it off as a YouTube video, they were blatantly lying to the American people at that point, and with no benefit to anyone. There was no security risk of telling us that this was a terror attack. This was 100% political gains for President Barack Obama.
The morning after the attacks, they actually emailed, I believe it was 2,000 people. They emailed 2,000 White House employees to tell them the story that they were going with, to tell them that it was from the YouTube video, so that when they went on interviews and stuff on TV, they could say that this was all due to a YouTube video instead of actually being a terrorist attack. This was just so that they could cover their tracks once again. They didn't want any loose ends that, might say that this was terrorist-like. They wanted everyone to be on track with the YouTube video so that there was no political repercussions whatsoever.
Now, they created this narrative in order to try to defend themselves from any sort of political attacks during this key general election. But what about the events leading up to the attack? Obviously, these attacks aren't something that just come out of the blue. There had to be failures in policy, failures in security that actually led up to allowing such a horrific attack against an American embassy to occur. So this report went on to detail a lot. It's kind of sad and scary at the same time, just how many failures occurred in the process leading up to the attack in Benghazi. This was set up from failure from the start. This was a failed policy, a failed idea from the start. So if you go back to 2012, December 2012, when the State Department's presence in Benghazi was actually extended, senior officials from the Bureau of Diplomatic Security were actually excluded from the discussion. Now, these are the people who are responsible for actually keeping our embassies safe across the world. And they were excluded from the discussion on what was actually happening in Benghazi, a very volatile region. And it gets worse. In August of 2012, roughly a month before the Benghazi attacks, security on the ground was worsened significantly. The city just wasn't safe anymore. And Ambassador Stevens himself had initially planned to travel to Benghazi in early August, but had to cancel his trip primarily for security reasons. The city was not safe, and we knew it wasn't safe, yet there wasn't enough security provided to actually keep our Americans there safe. And it all stems back to the fact of President Barack Obama's no boots on the ground policy.
If we actually could have put boots on the ground within Libya to help this ambassador, this would have never happened. These people would have been protected. The protesters, the terrorists, they wouldn't have even attacked the embassy if they knew that we had boots there protecting him. But they knew that he was unprotected, that he was obviously easy to attack. And this is all due to President Barack Obama's inability to protect our nation.
Now, this isn't just an insult at Barack Obama because we're, conservative radio and we hate him. This is direct evidence because this is backed by direct evidence because the normal security detail that was planned to go with Ambassador Stevens into Benghazi had to be canceled because of that no boots on the ground policy. And then the few remaining forces we did have in the city were instructed to only dress in civilian clothes because we didn't want the people of Benghazi and Libya to feel like the United States was invading them. This region was so volatile, it really would not have been a bad thing for the embassy to have projected strength. Instead, they wanted to make it look like there was no American soldiers there to protect it. This was a failed policy from the start. This was 100%. This embassy was set up to fail just because of the irresponsible decisions that were made by the president. And we knew that this was such a volatile region, the country as a whole. Barack Obama has said numerous times that one of his worst mistakes as president, and he'll admit this, was his failure to plan for the day after in Libya. Of course, this references what happened the day after we decided to back the rebels in Libya and we wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. This lead from behind foreign policy that he adopted in Libya, you choosing to back rebel groups, choosing to become involved at all, is what is responsible for, number one, the terror in the region at that time, these attacks in Benghazi. He destabilized the region and then prevented our American people at the embassy from actually receiving any sort of actual security. Now, this failure to plan for what happened after we got rid of Gaddafi is also the reason that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are thriving in Libya right now. Libya is 100% a safe haven for terrorism, and it's because of our failed foreign policy at the time.
We all know after you topple a dictator, there's going to be a power vacuum. And in this case, terrorism won in that power vacuum. And that's exactly why Benghazi, honestly, we shouldn't have had a consulate within Benghazi at all, an embassy.
One security personnel for the region actually titled or said that working at this embassy was considered a suicide mission. It was that bad. They knew from the start that the security was that bad. And numerous emails were sent to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, detailing just how bad security was. Yet most of these emails went unanswered or completely ignored. There was no extra security given.
Ambassador Stevens himself emailed Hillary Clinton asking for more security. And, of course, Hillary Clinton was sleeping or whatever with her private server, and then she just didn't even answer it. She didn't even respond to it.
One of the most disturbing parts of this report is the fact that the State Department, under Hillary Clinton leadership, was relying on the militias of an unstable region to protect American lives. They had no backup plan. They had no contingency plan. If things got really bad, which they did that fateful night, they had no way to rescue these people. And they knew perfectly well, Hillary Clinton that is, knew perfectly well the risks. She received numerous emails, and because of her great email server, we know she got those emails. We know she had to be somewhat competent at receiving emails, yet she ignored it. She ignored the request for extra security.
Now, keep in mind those militia forces that she was relying on to keep our ambassador safe are the same militias that didn't even help. They didn't help our ambassador whatsoever when this attack was going on. I've actually seen some stories saying that some of them fought against our personnel. So, obviously, her plan failed completely, and she knew that was a risk from the beginning.
Now, part 4 of the report went on to talk about the Barack Obama administration's response to the actual committee set up to investigate these attacks. Now, this part 4 details numerous times that Barack Obama had his administration delay the reports and the committee. And it's still withholding certain information from the committee themselves. They've worked with the best they have. But time after time again, Barack Obama has shown that he did not want to work with this committee to find truth. He didn't want to find out what happened. He's not interested in the recommendations in Part 5 of the report. Now, before we go to commercial break, I want to finish up this talk about Benghazi with just how poorly the Democratic Party themselves handled not Benghazi itself, but the investigation, and just how big a laughingstock, a joke, the Democratic report they released last week was on Benghazi. So, of course, this entire time, the Democratic Party has felt that this has been nothing more than an attack against Barack Obama, an attack against Hillary Clinton. They seem more concerned that the Republicans are trying to find out what the hell happened that night. They seem more concerned about that than they were about keeping Americans safe overseas.
Within the Democrats' actual report, they basically said that nothing went wrong, that everything just happened, there was no way to save anything.
There was nothing that could be done.
They actually referenced and connected things to Donald Trump more than some of the actual Americans that died within Benghazi.
If you actually look at just doing a quick Control F of their report, which is nearly 350 pages plus, you'll see who exactly is referenced. Now, they reference Hillary Clinton over 300 times. They referenced Donald Trump 23 times. Donald Trump had nothing to do with politics at this time. Donald Trump was a businessman trying to make more money at this time. He had nothing to do with Benghazi. So the fact that their very Democratic report even talks about Donald Trump gives you an idea of just how sad and pathetic this Democratic response to the report really is. The Democratic Party, time and time again, during the committee, while the committee was working on receiving information, finding the facts, deciphering what exactly everything meant, they showed time and time again they had absolutely no interest in this. Now they're trying to spin it off, and they're going to release this report. I'll tell you why they released this report. It's because they know that the Benghazi issue is going to come up time and time again during things like debates. And now Hillary Clinton will have some other report in order to reference. And, the liberal Americans will just buy it up. They already think that this is an attack at Hillary Clinton. If you're in that group, which you're probably not because you're listening to us still, but if you're in that group, and if you know people in that group, have them read the report. It's 800 pages. It's long. You don't have to read everything, but have them take a look at what actually happened and form their own decisions, because it's pretty damning when you actually look at the evidence of what's presented and just the failures that occurred at all levels of government that actually led up to these attacks and is the reason that Americans died that night.
So we're going to go to a quick commercial break right now. After this break, we're going to be coming back with Hillary Clinton's actual response to this report. So don't go anywhere. This is the Wise Conservative Show.
The idea behind Youth Revolt is to let them, these liberal professors, let them know that we are here and we're ready to fight.
Youth Revolt. Speak without fear.
8 years with Obama, and now no one knows what bathroom to use.
The Wise Conservative Show. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Only on Youth Revolt.
Tune in to Millennials Rising, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday nights, for a conservative outlook on pop culture and American politics. Together we can reinstitute values back into our nation's young people and help create an alternative path away from the mainstream liberal agenda. Tune in to Millennials Rising, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday nights, only on Youth Revolt. How's it going, everyone? Jason Veely here. I want to tell you about YouthRevolt.org, the ultimate media network for young conservatives. Youth Revolt features a lineup of young radio hosts, columnists, and video bloggers. These are some of the most courageous and articulate millennials out there. Give them some support and check out youthrevolt.org. Youthrevolt.org. Speak without fear.
Hey, little boy, you want some free college?
Bernie Sanders, that creepy uncle your mom warned you about. The Wise Conservative Show. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Only on Youth Revolt. Welcome back to the Wise Conservative Show. You're here with Dakota and Connor Wise. Now, we spent the last half hour talking about the failures of what happened that night in Benghazi, the failures of the Barack Obama administration to properly address and inform the American people of what actually happened that night, and of course the failures that led up to the attack in Benghazi that actually allowed such a horrendous attack to take place. Now, as we promised, we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton's response to the report that came out this week.
Hillary Clinton came out and said that we all just need to move on from this issue. She, of course, knows that this issue is going to greatly hurt her within this election cycle. She knows that it's already hurt her in the past with her reputation. And so she's trying to get all of America to just move on from this issue.
Now, once again this week, she referenced the fact that this report was nothing more than a right-wing conspiracy. Hillary Clinton seems to be under the impression that for the last 25 years of her life, as long as she's been in the public eye and in politics, the Republicans have created some sort of vast conspiracy in order to prevent her from, I don't know, moving up in jobs, getting elected. I don't really know what exactly we were planning with this conspiracy. I think people forgot to inform me that there was some sort of conspiracy against Hillary Clinton. I would have loved to have been involved if there had been one. But once again, Hillary Clinton is showing that she doesn't really want to talk about the failures that happened that night. I mean, you're talking about the woman who, when she was addressing Congress, being questioned by Congress over Benghazi, replied with, "What difference does it make?"
Even in those same hearings, she went and laughed about this entire situation. She doesn't take this seriously because she knew that what it really was the whole time. She knew that it was a terrorist attack, but she was covering it up. She knew that her entire administration, the Obama administration, had handled this very poorly, but she didn't care because this was benefiting them politically to lie.
Now, Hillary Clinton coming out and saying it's time to move on really pisses me off a little bit. And let me go off on a little bit of a tangent and explain why. Now, Hillary Clinton is essentially interviewing for the most powerful position in the world. And it's not Hillary Clinton that gets to decide the narrative of this presidential election. She answers to the American people. And if the American people want to find out why she lied to us about Benghazi, why she so poorly handled the situation, and why she didn't provide essential security to the men and women at the Benghazi embassy, then that is our decision, and we will keep talking about it for as long as we want to. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, anyone else running for president, they don't decide the narrative. It's we, the people, that get to decide the narrative. So Hillary Clinton saying it's time to move on is nothing more than a poorly executed political plan in order to try to prevent the fact that she failed. It's her job, or if she actually became president, it would be her job to keep Americans safe. That would be her number one job. And she likes to talk about, past experience and how she has way more experience than Donald Trump and is way more qualified. Well, her past experience in keeping Americans safe didn't really work out all that well. So if we, the people, want to talk about it, we're going to.
Well, we all know why she's actually doing this, though. She got caught in a lie.
Again.
Not only in a lie, though. She got caught doing her job horribly. She got caught covering it up. She got caught with a lot of different things. And now she, of course, wants us to forget about it.
Now, of course, this is kind of the story of Hillary Clinton's whole political career, going way back to when she was dismissed from the Watergate investigation because she outright was lying.
She has had an entire history of not telling the truth, and she's going to continue to lie in the future. It's just who she is. Honestly, I don't think at this point she can help herself but lie about everything.
Now, wrapping this up, because we're really not going to spend this episode talking about all the times Hillary Clinton has lied, because, quite frankly, we don't have time to do so. Hillary Clinton is going to try to spin a narrative that this was in the past, that, she's apologized for it, she did what she could, that nothing wrong happened. She's going to dismiss this report that found faults in her conduct. It'll be interesting to see how Donald Trump capitalizes on this, but I think it's essential, if he's to win the general election, that he stays persistent and doesn't allow Hillary Clinton to try to slide her way out of actually facing the facts. And the facts point to the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't execute her job properly, and Americans died because of it. So that just about wraps up our Benghazi talk today. A little over, 40 minutes, close to, on Benghazi. There's obviously a lot more. It was an 800-page report, which is just crazy. But if you really want to read it, it's enlightening. So moving on, we want to talk about how John Kerry is once again taking heat in response to the attacks in Istanbul last night.
As if you've actually looked at the news or read anything, you would know that 41, I believe, people were killed in an attack on an airport in Istanbul late last night. And this happened by multiple suicide bombers, and I believe ISIS is taking responsibility.
They haven't directly taken responsibility, but the Turkish government has said that all signs point towards ISIS.
But of course, John Kerry is coming out. We always love when he comes out and says these things. He's saying that ISIS is doing all of these attacks because they're desperate, because we have had so many successful victories against them.
John Kerry honestly believes that we're winning the war against ISIS, despite the fact now that almost on a monthly basis, some sort of major terror attack is occurring. This isn't the act of a desperate people. This isn't the act of desperation. This is just outright attacks. This is not a defensive posture that ISIS has taken.
This is going back to the no boots on the ground policy that Obama is going with. This policy has made it so that we're not attacking ISIS. We're not even bringing a fight to them. And so now John Kerry's coming out and saying that we're winning against them, that we're defeating them. That it doesn't even make sense on how we can even say that with the policy that Obama has continued to put into place.
If you actually look at what's occurring in the Middle East, the Iraqi army has had very limited success, of course, with the help of American airstrikes. But the Iraqi military itself has had very limited success in helping to push out ISIS from the Iraq region. And that's totally ignoring the fact that they cover at least half of Syria, probably more. ISIS is maybe on the defensive in certain areas, but on a whole, ISIS is really not all that concerned about what's going on elsewhere because there's really been no direct attacks against them. Their capital, we all know where their capital is, yet we've refused to take any sort of action against it. ISIS is not on the defensive. And the problem with ISIS, and we talk about this a lot when we talk about terror, but the problem with ISIS is that they've been allowed to thrive. Not just exist. They've been allowed to thrive for so long that so many of these people around the world who have become radicalized are saying, hey, look, ISIS has a thing going on and no one seems to be able to stop them. And so we're seeing these lone wolf attacks across the world. Now, there's no telling if the attack in Istanbul was of a terror cell or of lone wolves who decided to go blow people up. That will come out in due time. But across the world, these lone wolf attacks are becoming more and more prominent simply because we have failed to stop ISIS.
This all is the fault of this current administration. It's all the fault of not being able to actually do anything. And as my co-host just said, they have been able to thrive. I mean, they've basically set up their own country. They have their own economy.
Taxes.
They're selling oil to people. They have a thriving economy, actually. So ISIS has set up basically a country because we haven't been willing to try to take them out. And there's going to be more attacks on airports in the region. There's going to be more attacks on, well, probably more cities in America and our allies. It's going to happen until we do take this fight to them, which hasn't happened yet, but it has to happen soon.
No. Instead, the Democrats are more focused on stopping the largest threat in the world, which they claim is global warming. So this past week, Hillary Clinton gave a speech in which she stated that the biggest threat in the world is actually climate change, and that terrorism really isn't all that big of a deal. I guess she decided to pull a page out of the Bernie Sanders playbook. But what really has people worried is of course, moving on a little bit from the terror aspect of things, is the proposed platform that the Democratic Party had actually set up for the Democratic Convention. And one of the key talking points that they had was that they were going to start going after oil companies with the Department of Justice and force them, well, number one, go after them because apparently the oil companies have somewhere, I'm not sure where this law exists, but somehow the fact that oil companies have tried to, quote-unquote, downplay the role of global warming in the world is somehow illegal now, or they at least want to make it illegal. So let's actually break this down. Hillary Clinton wants to use the Department of Justice to go after companies that refuse to believe in the hocus science of global warming. Folks, that's the loss of freedom of speech.
Anytime anyone doesn't share the exact narrative that Hillary Clinton and the rest of the Democrats hold, she wants to go after them with the government. She wants to go after their rights. And this happens all the time. She's done it in the past, and we can see that she doesn't care about their First Amendment right, about our First Amendment right. All she cares about is trying to get out her global warming narrative to the rest of the world.
Now, let's actually look at it. They'll say stuff like, oh, all the climate scientists agree. Oh, that's really great for them. They are climate scientists. But really, number one, just going off of the whole global warming debate, if you want to look at the actual data we have, the Earth is billions of years old, according to these people, yet they have maybe 100 years of data on global trends. We really don't have enough data to actually tell what the hell is happening in the global climate. We're extrapolating data so far that it really is not even valid, and then we're using the expectations of that extrapolated data to create these quote-unquote models that pretty much confirm what they want them to confirm. There's really no hard evidence of climate change. And even if there were, you know what? So what if a company decides to say, you know what, we don't really believe in that? You can't force people to believe in a particular scientific belief, just the same way you can't really turn global warming into a scientific law. If I don't want to believe in gravity, I don't have to believe in gravity. If I want to believe the world is flat, hell, I can believe the world is flat. So why can't people decide that they don't want to believe in global warming? Whatever the cause may be, whatever the reason they don't want to believe in it, let them. It's not illegal. But this right here represents the core problem with Hillary Clinton. She doesn't care about the Constitution. When was the last time you heard her speak the words Constitution? Maybe when she wanted to tear up the Second Amendment, and that's about it. This is 100% anti-American at its core. These do not represent the core values that our country has stood for generation after generation. But that's really what the Democratic Party has become. The Democratic Party really no longer represents core American values. Sure, in the past we had Democrats and we had Republicans, but for the most part we could agree that we lived in the greatest nation on earth, that we enjoy liberties and freedoms, and that our Constitution is there to protect those freedoms. But the current Democratic Party has been dragged so far left, and it's happened in, the last 8 years. Barack Obama has dragged the Democratic Party so far left that they really don't even sound like Americans anymore. You want to look at what's happening across the world. Look at Brexit. Brexit really represents the shift from globalism back to maybe nationalism isn't really that bad a thing. Yet that's what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, they hate nationalism. They hate the fact that Americans really think our country is the greatest, because it is, but they really hate that train of thought.
Well, and that's exactly why when they're talking about an event such as Brexit, they hate it. They say it's going to fail completely, that the world's going to be way worse off because of it, because they don't think anyone should be proud of the country that they live in for some strange reason.
I mean, let's just look at what happened in Brexit. What actually occurred was a country took back their sovereignty from a group of unelected bureaucrats. That should be celebrated by every American, regardless of party lines, really. I mean, that's something here in America we've enjoyed for 200 plus years. And we're going to, well, I'm not going to say we're going to. The Democrats are going to say, well, that's a bad idea. Really? When was having a sovereign nation a democratic nation? Because for years and hundreds of years, they were essentially a democratic nation. When has that ever been a bad thing? I mean, people seem to forget that even though we left Britain was still a democracy. The people were still voting. We left because the colonies didn't get a vote in Britain. So it's not like there's some dictatorship. It's not like they're a bad country. They were the most powerful nation in the world for a very long time, and they still to this day hold the record for largest empire. I say good for them. Let them have their own country.
I've seen a lot of liberals, they attack Brexit for it's going to be a horrible turn on the economy. It's going to destroy the market. But actually, if you actually look at the market now, it's already recovering from Brexit. The only reason why it even had a dip was because so many people thought that they were actually going to stay in the EU. So all of their arguments, every single one of them that the liberals continue to use against this gaining back sovereignty, it's not even a real argument.
Well, if you look at it, I think a large portion of the Democratic Party, or at least the Democratic leadership, would love the United States to be in some sort of agreement like the European Union. They hate the fact that America has so much nationalism. I mean, seriously, when was the last time you heard a Democrat talk about how great our country is? All you hear is what's wrong with it. And yeah, we have our problems like any other country, but we still live in one of the, if not the greatest country in the world. If you listen to Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or any of these people, you would think we were stuck in some backwards, I don't know, third world country that had no freedoms, no liberties. You would think we were the worst nation in the world.
If you even hear them complimenting any country at all, it's never America. It's always one of the socialist nations within Europe. It's always one of those nations over there. It's never us, because for some reason our freedoms are privatized healthcare, because they hate that. It's leading us to be a horrible nation to them. I don't understand how they continue to go further towards that globalism, globalist viewpoint, because it's continuing and it's continuing. And throughout just this election, I have seen that globalist viewpoint grow even more. I have seen more people now than ever think that America isn't worthy of being a great country anymore.
And that's a key point. Really, what I think Donald Trump and then the Brexit, they've been compared to each other a lot. And I have to say, what really, really makes them similar is that both have this idea. Both believe in the idea that their country is great, that they can make it work, and that we don't need to be reliant on other countries in order to be a great nation. And I think that's starting to have a lot of value to it. And a lot of people across the world are starting to actually say and look at it and say, you know what? I'm proud of my country. I don't need to be in the EU. I don't need to be a member of another nation. I want to have control of what happens where I live, and I want to have a say in it. And so across the world, that's what's happening. So, I mean, does that mean Donald Trump's going to win? No. Is it a good sign for him? I wouldn't even go that far. I'd just say that across the world, this idea that nationalism is having a resurgence is coming back. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Nationalism is not a bad thing. And people will be like, Nazi Germany had nationalism. So did every other country in all of Europe, all across the world had nationalism. I mean, if you take it to the extreme like Nazi Germany, well, that's one thing. But there's nothing wrong with sitting here and saying, I'm proud of my country. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I'm proud to live here. There's nothing wrong with that. So, folks, that just about wraps up this episode of the Wise Conservative Show. I'm glad we got that Benghazi stuff taken care of. There's a lot to it. It's a very important topic because it's going to play a huge role in this election cycle. I think we're going to see that come up time and time again. But until next time, my name is Dakota Wise. With me, my co-host Connor Wise. We've had a blast over this last hour. We're glad you can join us. You can find us at facebook.com/weeknormal, Spreaker.com/The Wise Conservative Show. Or, as always, you can find us on Instagram at
the_wise_conservative.
So until next time, folks, we'd like to wish you a good night. And as always, God bless.